More than 35 years after the Cradock Four were abducted, tortured, murdered, and their bodies desecrated and burned beyond recognition, the families of Matthew Goniwe, Sparom Konto, Stelom Hlauli, and Fort Kalata today filed an application with the Pretoria High Court in an attempt to finally force the police and the National Prosecuting Authority to bring the murders to book. The last apartheid president, F.W. de Klerk, is cited as one of the respondents in what could pave the way for hundreds of similar cases that could finally make their way to the country's courts. Tonight on the program, we talk to Fort Kalata's son, Lukhanyo, who brought today's court application. We also hear from Advocate Dumisa Ntsebeza, who is a former commissioner of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, who has filed a supporting affidavit. We'll also tell you why the F.W. de Klerk Foundation is opposing the move. The Watchdog starts now. To set the scene for this evening's conversation, here's an excerpt from a documentary Lukhanyo Kalata produced some years ago, retracing how his father and his comrades cruelly met their fateful destiny.
On the morning of June 27th, 1985, my father and three friends and colleagues, Matthew Goniwe, Sparom Konto, and Sitelom Hlauli, left Cradock to attend a briefing of the United Democratic Front in Port Elizabeth. That morning was the last time my mother, my sister and I would see my father and his colleagues alive. On their return to Cradock from Port Elizabeth that winter's evening, my father, Fort Kalata, and his three comrades were ambushed by state security forces. These policemen were acting under strict instructions from the highest ranks in both the apartheid government and military to kill them. The bodies of my father and his comrades were found several days later in dense bushes just outside Port Elizabeth. They had been stabbed, shot, mutilated and burnt to hide their identities. My father, Fort Kalata, and his comrades Matthew Goniwe, Sparom Konto, and Sitelom Hlauli became known as the Cradock Four. On July 20th, 1985, the day of their funeral, 60,000 mourners defied a government ban to be in Cradock.
And I want to say to the South African government, do not protect those people. Why have you created a climate in this country in which our children can be shot down in the streets by a policeman and that policeman can get away with it?
That same afternoon, State President P.W. Botha declared South Africa's first state of emergency since the Sharpeville massacre.
Emergency in the following ministerial districts.
It's been 25 years since that fateful night, yet the men who killed my father and his comrades are still out there, and justice continues to evade us, their surviving families.
It's very difficult for me as well to see Mama and to see you guys and to hear you talk like this, and there's no closure. So I would like to then ask for permission from you to then be in a position to do that and to go and ask those questions to your authorities.
You're more than welcome to do so.
Well, Lukhanyo joins us live from Cape Town, and here in Johannesburg we also have Advocate Dumisa Ntsebeza. I'm going to start with you, Lukhanyo. Well, you chose to file this application on the day of the anniversary of your father and his comrades' burial.
Brabuya, thank you very much. Yes, today is obviously quite a significant day in our family as well as the other families' lives, because it was on
Okay, we seem to have a challenge with Lukanyo Kalata's line. We're going to try and re-establish that line. And if I may, Advocate Ntsebeza, come to you for a while, or while we're trying to re-establish that line with Lukanyo Kalata. You filed a supporting affidavit, and I know that from you've been saying this year in and year out. You've been at it with some of your former colleagues in the TRC that it's about time that the perpetrators of these gross human rights violations, who never got or even applied, some of them, for amnesty, should indeed be brought to book in order to bring closure.
Yeah, yes, indeed. I've always been making this because those of us who are familiar with the so-called TRC Act, the Promotion of National Unity and Reconciliation Act, will be aware that amnesty, which was in fact the first of its kind in the whole world, because there are certain crimes in relation to which amnesty can never be granted at international humanitarian law or international human rights law. Torture is one of them. Murder under certain circumstances is one of them. So it was an anomaly, and that is why the South African public or the South African legislature enacted a law that said we will grant amnesty, provided that in that window period, those who know that they should apply for amnesty, if they come and make a full disclosure, they will be granted amnesty. Or those who come to participate in the amnesty granting process and do not make a full disclosure, then they will be denied amnesty. So, and simply because it was not something that, as I say, in relation to certain crimes, can be granted, to any offenders. There was a window period of only 1 year, from up to October 1997. Now, the murderers of the Cradock Four never applied for amnesty. I suppose they thought, that law would never be implemented. That is the reason, therefore, that we were saying, because they never applied for amnesty, or... Okay,
I'll indicate when I'm going to take them.
Because those who, if they applied for amnesty and didn't get it, and that was the case, like, for instance, for people like Nivote, who died without him ever having been charged, they should have been prosecuted. And therefore, the fact that we are now still calling for prosecution is a scandal. And it's something that the NPA or the South African government, the post-apartheid democratic government, should explain to the people of South Africa.
Well, it looks like... Well, it looks like there's a lot of, a blaming game going on, and we will get into that in a short while. Because some weeks ago, I did have a conversation with the person leading the unit that's going to be responsible for this, if indeed the NPA decides to go ahead. I know that the papers that were filed today give them 60 days within which to indicate whether indeed they intend prosecuting these people, and by all indications it looks like the NPA is now determined to forge ahead. But before we get there, what was your understanding of why there was such a reluctance, to actually prosecute these cases in spite of the recommendation that the TRC made?
I'm tired now of speculating and saying maybe it was because there were deals that were made between the apartheid securocrats and the liberation movement. Because there has been a lot of those kinds of suggestions that, there were compromise deals that were entered into. But we will never get to the bottom of it if we don't do that which we now have called upon the president to do. I am one of the people who have signed a petition, and we are calling upon the president to appoint a commission of inquiry, which is going to look into this anomaly. As I say, 30 years down the line, more or less, after the recommendation which had made in 1998, those people who didn't get amnesty, either because they never applied for it or they applied for it, told a lot of lies, didn't make a full disclosure, they must be prosecuted, because even the Promotion of National Unity and Reconciliation Act of 1985 provided for prosecution of those people. Now explain why there were no prosecution. Of course, we know from Ackerman, from Piccoli, in some of the affidavits that they filed in, that they were interfered with, that the executive interfered with them and said, don't prosecute these TRC cases. Now, we want to know why. That is why we are saying, President Ramaphosa, kindly please make sure that there is a commission of inquiry which should look into why there were no prosecutions when there was a need for those prosecutions. Because we wouldn't be sitting with a problem like Rodriguez, who now says so many years down the line, no, may there be a stay of my prosecution because I'm old, because there have been so many years that have gone down the line. Of course, the SCA has rejected that. But why were our recommendations not followed? We call for a commission of inquiry.
And that's one of the questions you're saying in your affidavit, Lucanio, needs to be answered.
Yes, Vuyo. I'm hoping that you can eventually hear me this time. That is indeed one of the questions that we feel needs to be answered. There's a lot that has happened since the TRC concluded its work in 2003. There was a lot that was expected of the successive administrations of former President Thabo Mbeki, former President Kgalema Motlanthe, even though he was there for quite a short while, and former President Jacob Zuma. Unfortunately, that work now, we expect that work to be done by the administration of the incumbent President Cyril Ramaphosa, because we need to know who it was within both the government as well as the governing party that stopped someone like Advocate Vusi Piccoli from prosecuting these cases. In his affidavit that he filed, I think in the Noctula Simelane matter, states that, he had conversations with Mama Bridget Mabandla, who was Justice Minister at the time. Who else was there? A few weeks ago, the FW de Clerk Foundation issued a statement, and in that statement, they mentioned that there were former ANC leaders that got into some kind of arrangement, some loose, informal arrangement with members of, former apartheid operatives to ensure that the TRC cases are never prosecuted. So obviously the Clerk Foundation knows who these former ANC leaders are, and we would urge the foundation to come up and to step forward and give us those names so that we can get the answers from those individuals to say, on whose behalf did you get into an informal agreement with the same people that murdered our fathers, that murdered our mothers, our brothers, our sisters, our aunts, and our uncles? How can you get into an informal agreement with the people that committed crimes against our humanity? On whose mandate did they do that? So we need to have those answers or those questions answered, and it needs to happen soon while our parents are still alive.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I'm going to try and read from a statement that the FWD Clerk Foundation actually put out a few weeks ago. As you say, this was on the back of a conversation we had here, where the NPA said that they've put together a team or teams of people who are going to work on these cases. And shortly thereafter, there was a joint announcement between the Hawks and the Special Crimes Investigation Unit and the NPA, basically confirming what Mr. McAdam from the NPA said on this show only a few days earlier. And the FWD Clerk Foundation statement reads in part, when it embarks on this course, the NPA should give very careful consideration to the constitutional requirement that, and I quote, everyone is equal before the law and has the right to equal protection and benefits of the law. It would accordingly be unacceptable to apply one standard to apartheid-era crimes and another to crimes perpetrated by anti-government organizations. And yet there is not the slightest indication in the NPA's statement that it has any intention whatsoever to prosecute the latter. This is despite the fact that the vast majority of approximately 22,000 people were killed in political violence between 1984 and 1994, and they died in the conflict between the ANC and the IFP, or as a result of the actors of other anti-government organizations. Of course, the statement goes on, but here's a part that I also think is just as interesting. It says, the NPA should also recall the amnesty was not granted to 27 senior ANC leaders, many who are still alive, who had applied unsuccessfully to the TRC for collective amnesty and who were in overall command of the ANC's revolutionary activities. Could that be one explanation, at least, for why these prosecutions didn't take place? Lucanio?
Well, I think we must be very careful of what that statement says by the FWD Clerk Foundation. Because, I mean, when I read that statement, I thought to myself, like, here is de Klerk, in essence, trying to equate the just struggle against apartheid and the criminal acts of the apartheid government that he once led. See, the struggle against apartheid, you cannot compare the two. So people who did certain things, fighting an unjust apartheid, cannot be compared to the murderers and to the criminals of the apartheid justice to apartheid. And this is what de Klerk is trying to do in that statement. So we must be very careful of falling into the trap. Now, if there were crimes committed by people fighting against apartheid, a crime is a crime. And no one is above the law in this country of ours, and those people should be held accountable. Those people should be held accountable. But I think where there were just cause, some people should be granted amnesty and should not be prosecuted because they were trying to fight against an illegal and unjust system that was foisted on us as black people in this country. So I don't want to take anything that de Klerk says seriously. I think what de Klerk needs to come out to this country and tell us are a couple of things. One, who are the ANC leaders that got into an agreement with the former apartheid operatives not to prosecute TRC cases? Two, what did he, as F.W. de Klerk, what did he say in the meeting of 10 June 1985 when the State Security Council was discussing the military signal that was sent by Brigadier Joffel van der Westhuizen about the permanent removal from society of Fort Galade, Matthew Goniwe, and Umbulelo Goniwe? What did F.W. de Klerk say in that meeting? Because we know that only a few days thereafter, after that meeting, my father and his comrades were killed. So those are the two things that we need from de Klerk. Everything else we don't want to hear. We want to hear nothing from him. He must tell us two things.
To me, I hear what Lucanio has just said, and that, of course, would be the understanding of most of us, that you cannot really, compare the two. But what if, just what if, what the de Klerk Foundation is saying was actually an understanding that they had from the conversations or negotiations or pre-negotiations that they had with some in the ANC. And I'm going to read you another line from their statements, where they say that what the NPA announced ignores entirely, and I quote, ignores entirely the fact that amnesty was, from the outset, a sine qua non for the negotiations between the ANC and the National Party. The NP government originally proposed that the Noorgaard principles should be used to determine who should reasonably be granted indemnity or amnesty. The principle has been successfully applied in Namibia and followed amnesty of all those who had committed offenses in the pursuit of political objectives, unless they had made use of egregious or disproportionate violence. However, the NP government was forced to abandon the Noorgaard principles as the ANC's price for returning to negotiations after 26 September 1992. The ANC demanded the release of its cadres who were still in prison and insisted that political motive should be the only requirement. Do they have a point or not? Advocate Zaleza?
Unfortunately, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Unfortunately, the province of the Promotion of National Unity and Conciliation Act, had certain objectives in mind. And you must remember that that is a law that was enacted by the Democratic Parliament, in which the ANC had the majority. And
was part of that government of national unity.
And yes, and the de Klerk government was part of that government of national unity. So, we now, so many years down the line, we can start to think and say, but how could it have been so that the crimes of apartheid could be equated with the actions of those who were fighting for liberation? And that is why, if one reads very carefully the language of the Promotion of National Unity and Reconciliation Act, one sees that it avoids emotive definitions or words like murder. It talks about killing because there was an objective. And that is why the operation of the Criminal Act as we know it was suspended for a year to enable people. That is why in the Azapo judgment, even though there was very strong opposition by those who argued on behalf of Azapo, precisely because the position that was taken by Azapo and others, the Biko family and those who supported the position taken by the Azapo organization. You can't equate, crimes committed in the name of apartheid with killings or any of the actions or conduct by those who were fighting for liberation. Mohammed's judgment in the Azapo in the Azapo case, says it all, that this was a compromise that was sought to achieve national unity, provided that people would come and speak the truth, all of it. And in fact, when you look at the first constitution, you will see that the provision for amnesty was as if it was an afterthought. It was at a place called the post-amble, because with the constitution in the manner in which it was, without that post-amble that provided for amnesty, then there would not have been anything to stop prosecution of those who had committed murders. So I think we must accept that there was a law, and a law that was passed by a post-apartheid democratic government that said, for these kinds of crimes, heinous though they may be, there are people who got amnesty for crimes that you cannot imagine how they could have got amnesty for those kinds of crimes. But they did. Why? Because they met the barest minimums. In fact, whenever I look and I examine the amnesty applications and those applications that were successful, I usually say, I think at the end of the day, the amnesty committee wanted to establish whether those that had come to apply for amnesty had spoken the truth, the whole truth, and nothing else but the truth, and had made a full disclosure of the crimes in relation to which they wanted amnesty. If they satisfied that, however heinous the crime, they would be granted amnesty. When we look back so many years down the line, we are able to say, hey, but man, how could this have been? That was the deal. That is why, therefore, it is even worse when it is clear that there are people who said, I'm not going to go to that nonsense and apply for amnesty for whatever reasons. And they should have done so. That they have not been prosecuted really calls for the kind of commission of inquiry that we are asking for. Why were the people not prosecuted? And two, a commission of inquiry now must call all those people, including the executives who gave orders to your Picolis, to your Ackermans, and said, hey, stay away from these TRC-related cases. We want to know. Lucanio has just mentioned that Bridget Mabanja was an executive, was a Minister of Justice. She's one of those people, according to Ackerman and the Vusi, who said, don't interfere with these apartheid-related, with these TRC-related cases. Now the question is, how could there have been such an order in light of the legislation that says, if you don't take the chance which we gave you, even if it meant you must go scot-free of having committed the most heinous of crimes, because that was the deal, and it was enacted to be the law, then you have no excuse thereafter when the law comes after you. The law was there. It never came after them. Why?
Now, we did ask the Clerk Foundation to come on, and their spokesperson, Dave Stewart, sent a rather said to us that they will not be participating because they believe that they won't be afforded a fair hearing. I don't know where he got that from. But just finishing that thought, in your affidavit, Lukhanyo, one of the points you make is that not only were these cases not taken forward, but the government took active steps, you say, to ensure that the perpetrators of apartheid-era crimes were protected from prosecution. And one of the cases that you are highlighting is the case of Nkadimeng versus others versus the National Director of Public Prosecutions, where you felt that this was in relation, of course, to Nokuthula Simelane, who was a young freedom fighter who was murdered in 1983. You went to court, they went to court to challenge what then was an amended policy, where they sought to allow these killers to basically get away scotch-free. Doesn't it make sense then, from what Advocate Ntsebeza has just said, and all these other endeavors, where people tried to still continue with this agenda, whatever the motivation was, to actually make sure that these people who didn't seek amnesty, which was against, the law, but there were attempts to actually make sure that they still find a way of escaping. So clearly, there was something cooking there.
Something has always been cooking. Something has always been cooking. Now, we can sit here and we can speculate around what exactly has been cooking. When in the Timol matter, for instance, if I can just raise that up, I know that Imtiaz Kaji, when the NPA started investigating, he had to write to the NPA and to say to them, but listen, we can't have this person and this person and this person as part of the team that is investigating a Timol's murder. Because these people that are now part of the team had, they were involved. They're from the old guard. They were involved in torturing people. How could we have those kinds of investigators being part of the team, basically investigating themselves, investigating their friends in the atrocities that they committed against us? That's just one issue, Vuyo. Now, we can talk about and we can speculate about what else is happening within the NPA, what else is happening within the government that we don't know about, things that are being kept from us as to why these cases should not be going forward. And this is why Advocate Ntsebeza is raising the issue of a commission of inquiry. Me personally, my family, and the Cradock Foundation, we are all signatories to this call that, by the former TRC commissioners and a whole number of other families as part of the Apartheid Family Victims Group, and, all of us, because we are calling on the president to set up this commission of inquiry because we have to know. We have to know who are the people that are responsible, who are the people that have been cooking in the background to ensure that these cases do not go anywhere. Imagine if the Clerk, for instance, had been prosecuted for his role in the murders of the Cradock Four in 1994 or 1995 or 1996 already. Imagine how far we would be as a society, because that would have established the rule of law back then already. It would have ensured that in this country, the value of a black man and the life of a black man and woman is given value, that everybody knows that black lives, they matter too. So that whether you are the president or some low-life criminal, it matters not who you are. Whatever crime you commit, you will be held accountable. Imagine if that was done back in 1994 already. What kind of society we would be living in now, we would be raising our children in today. This whole thing with Jacob Zuma, former President Jacob Zuma, going to jail and all of that, we would not have batted an eyelid, because what we would have the kind of society that says, oh, well, if you're a president in this country and you're involved in a crime of whatever kind, you will go to jail. But now the people, they saw former President Jacob Zuma going to jail, but they're asking themselves, but hold on, what about the Clerk? You see, and this is why it is important for us today, Vuyo, to try and undo the failures of the African National Congress. We have to now show them, we have to lead the ANC in creating the kind of society that our leaders, that our fathers, that our martyrs actually died for. And if it means that we have to start from point one, then that is what we must do. And we must prosecute the people that committed the crimes against our humanity. Because by doing that, we will be laying the foundations and we will be laying the grounds for a new kind of society, the kind of society that says rule of law above everything else. Our constitutional democracy guarantees the fact that we are all equal before the law. Because as things stand right now, all of those people that decided to play God with my father's life and decided that he must die and he must live, those people are still living today, and they think of themselves probably as living above the law, as living above our constitutional democracy. And we need to cut them down to size and prove to everyone that here we have a constitutional democracy that was paid for by the blood of our fathers.
Okay, we're going to take a quick ad break. After the break, we're going to look at statements that have been made by the NPA and determine whether, in fact, they are going to give Lukhanyo Xalata and his family, the rest of the Cradock Four families, and indeed other families like the Ahmad Timol family, like the Steve Biko family, the kind of progress and give them what they have been asking for all this time. That's coming up after this short break. Don't go away. Welcome back. This is the Watchdog, and if you've just joined us, we're in conversation with Lukhanyo Xalata, who is the son of Fort Xalata, one of the Cradock Four, who were abducted, tortured, murdered, and their bodies desecrated and burnt beyond recognition. Today, the families of Matthew Goniwe, Sparom Kondo, Stelom Mhlauli, and Fort Xalata filed an application with the Pretoria Higher Court to finally force the police and the National Prosecuting Authority to bring the murderers to book. They have given the police about 30 days to decide, and they have given the National Prosecuting Authority 60 days to decide on whether they are going to prosecute these cases. The last apartheid president, F.W. de Klerk, is cited as one of the respondents, I should say. All of this, of course, could mean that hundreds of similar cases could finally make their way to the country's courts. Now, some weeks ago, I had here on the program Mr. McAdam, who is a member of the National Prosecuting Authority, and I asked him why there were all these delays and whether they were finally doing anything about it. Listen to him responding to that.
These are very old cases. There have been unique challenges with these cases, which we sincerely regret. But at this moment in time, we can't turn back the clock. We can merely try and make amends since 2019 for what should have taken place from 2003 to 27, but unfortunately did not.
Well, he also said that they have put in place teams of investigators who are going to be dedicated to these particular cases.
We are trying now to put as much resources as the state can permit to try and belatedly, and regrettably belatedly, do justice to these cases.
Lukanyo Kalata, does that give you hope? And does it answer, at least some of the things you're raising in your affidavit?
You know, it doesn't matter what he has to say. We are going to ensure that through this court process that that the NPA must do what it has to do. His words honestly don't inspire confidence in me. I think, you know, there's a level of admission, you know, that they can't really do much. But it doesn't matter. We have a judiciary in this country that's functioning, and we will compel the NPA to do what is right. Because Fort Kalata deserves justice, Matthew Goniwe deserves justice, Ustelum Mhlawuli deserves justice, and Sparom Kondo deserves justice. And I can go on, Noktula Simelan, Mamu Victoria Mtleng, Neil Agate, Kakaole Godoloz, Sipo Hashe, Champion Galet. You know, there's so many of them that we can just, all of them, they deserve justice. And the NPA has got the constitutional obligation to give them their justice. So, Mr. McAdam, I'm really sorry, but I mean, his words don't inspire a lot of confidence. But we're not going to be dissuaded by that. We are here for a particular purpose. We have got life in our bodies. We have got brains in our heads. There's, you know, and we have got words in our mouths, and we will continue to do that. And we will find the people with the necessary expertise in law, such as people like our advocate in Sabeza, who can help us advance this cause. And we will win because we are on the right side of history. And we will bring the ANC and the government that it leads to its knees, because it has to do right by us, and it has to do right by the people who bled and died for this country.
Advocate Nsabeza, I know that this is not how Chris McAdam put it, but to pick up from Lukanyo's last words, they could win, the Cradock Four families could win, the families of the Pepcourt, they could win, the Steve Biko, the Ahmed Timols, the Noktula, the Smelana families, all these families could win this time around because there is willingness on the part of the NPA to correct the wrongs that former NPA head advocate Vusi Pikoli's affidavit speaks to. There's no more interference. He said, McAdam, that is, during that interview, that one of the conditions Shamila Batoyi accepting the job of NDPP was that there would be no interference. And up until now, from the day she joined the NPA up until now, there has been no evidence, McAdam was saying, that there is interference. If anything, they are being encouraged to prosecute without fear or favor.
Well, one hopes that is so. I mean, Chris, you know, it's very ironic that, you know, today I should be speaking about the Cradock Four and PEPCO 3. Chris McAdam will tell you that there was a time when he and I personally had been seized from a police station. We traced them to where they were murdered. We actually went to the place where they had been detained and they were beaten to death. We also traced from some of the police whom we had conducted, and Chris had made all those arrangements. We even went to the Fish River, or to the banks of the Fish River, where it was reputed that the ashes of those people, the PEPCO 3, after they had been burnt on a pile of wood, after they had been beaten to pulp, those ashes were reported to have been thrown along the Fish River. We went there. Chris McAdam should remember that. From there, we went to Cradock because we wanted now to seal everything that had to do with the killings of the Cradock Four and the PEPCO 3. One would hope that Chris remembers that and that he should lead those who are going to do the investigation, because I can vouch for him having been with me as head of the investigative unit when we ventured into the Eastern Cape. And I said, I want to see the places which are relevant in the murder of the PEPCO 3 and the Cradock 4. So he has had first-hand experience in being party to an investigative process, and therefore it should be easy for him to recall situations like Lukani was saying. You know, we need a special type of police person or a special type of investigator. The nature that we had in the investigative unit of the TRC to investigate these cases, because a lot depends on these cases.
And Lucanio, this is not about vengeance. This is not about retaliation.
No, it's never it's never about vengeance. It's not about retaliation. It's not about any of those things. What this is about love. You see, because I love my father and I am doing what I am doing. Temin Kadimeng loves her sister. So she's acting out of a place of love. This has got nothing to do with the perpetrators, actually, but it's got everything to do with our loved ones. And all that we're trying to do is to ensure that my father, for Khalad, that there's value attached to his life.
Yeah.
That there is justice for him. That my younger sister, Utumani, who was born 2 weeks after the funeral, what I'm trying to do is to ensure that she remembers her father correctly, that she knows that the person that took her father away from her, the fact that she had to grow up in life without her father, has been held accountable because somebody said her father was worth the justice. Her father was worth the love. That her father was a human being who deserves to be recognized for the sacrifice that he made. Yeah. This is really, it's got nothing to do with the perpetrators, but it has everything to do with my dad.
Advocate Ntebeza, it's also about ensuring that never again does a handful of people sit in some structure, whatever it may be called, and order the permanent removal of people from society. It's also about ensuring that no head of state would sit in some security council or state security meeting and listen to or be part of a group of people that says remove those people permanently from society. It's about sending very strong messages about the kind of country we want to build going forward.
Yeah, well, one would hope at the end of the day that the resilience of South African people who want to see justice would triumph over all these machinations. I mean, you see what has been most disappointing about our post-apartheid constitutional democratic republic is the fact that we have not been implementing some of the things that we had committed to. And we are making the constitutions or the promises of the constitution hollow because, regrettably, we, especially an ANC-led government, who should know better, who were the ones, who had, even in the constitution of the ANC, a Bill of Rights and, incorporated in the ANC's constitution, who should lead society as they claim that they want to lead society. And but under their watch, certain things have happened.
And that's what
it is. You must say it is the ANC-led government that put into place the Promotion of National Unity and Reconciliation Act. And they should see that through. They should be able to make sure that never again should. The problem, of course, is that, people say, we should do things such that, history should not repeat itself. But we have seen, and the evidence of the last few days is very much, a testimony to it.
Okay.
That we repeat the same mistakes that we made, and it should be. We should inquire as to why we make those kinds of mistakes.
And that's why
that we could not.
And that's where we're going to leave this evening. Special thanks to Lukanya Kalata and to Advocate Buhle Ntebeza. And that's our show for this evening. Do join us again tomorrow evening, 8 o'clock. Until then, from me and the team, have a good night.